Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 30th of October. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to start with the LPR region, the north of LPR, the east of Kharkiv region, from this area. As you can see, there are a lot of icons. The Russians were attacking or defending themselves all along the front line. There are a few icons on the Russian source map saying about the progress and so on. As you can see, we see almost the same picture as we saw yesterday and the day before yesterday. But there are some changes with the Western sources maps and the Russian sources map according to the progress on the ground. If we are talking about the global scope, the Ukrainians were attacking in this area all along the front line. They were attacking in direction of Kislinka, Kotlarovka, the same towns on the east from Kupiansk, trying to develop their bridgehead in direction of Svatove. The Ukrainians were trying to develop their bridgehead near Liman area, trying to cut the road that connects Kreminna and Svatove. But to tell the truth, we are following this situation every day, and every single day it seems to me like a big trap for the Ukrainians, for their army on the north of Ukraine, on the east of Ukraine, on the north of the territory that is under Russian control. Because if you take a look at the map of this position, you're gonna see that there are a lot of forces in this area, a lot of mechanized forces, a lot of foreign volunteers, a lot of forces who are trying to storm and crack this area for more than a month without any result. And if the Ukrainians are able to achieve some success, the next day they're losing their positions. I'm not pro-Russian or pro-Ukrainian in this situation. I'm just giving my opinion that something tells me that this is a very big mistake of the Ukrainians to have such big forces, such a big number of forces on this side. Maybe they have their own plan, maybe they still believe that they're able to penetrate the Russian defense orders near Svatove-Kreminna. Maybe they can, I'm not saying that they are not able to do this, but the time is running, and we see that during this counter-offensive operation on the north and the same operation in the south, we see that the Russians meanwhile open their own front line, and they're pretty successful. We will discuss the Russian offensive operation a little bit in a few minutes later. So, as a result of all those attacks on the Svatove-Kreminna front line, the Ukraine lost around 250 soldiers and something around 19 vehicles, including tanks, trucks, cars, and so on. The Western sources maps, if we take a look at the map of deployment, there is a very important update and difference between the Russian source map. And I'm talking about a town by the name of Kislevka, this one, Kislovka and Kotlarovka. According to the Russian sources map, this town, Kislevka, Kotlarovka, is under Russian control. This is a very important checkpoint along the road. And it's a very big town, and this difference is very important. So we need to follow this situation to understand, because this is very important checkpoint. If we're talking about the Russian sources, they haven't reported about that, but believe me, if the Russians loses the towns, now they're trying to announce and to report about the situation. So this is very important update. Now the important update that according to the Western sources, the Ukrainians managed, the 100th time in a row to get control or to enter the town Novosilovska, this one. This town is located in the road that leads to Svatove. This important town, every single square meter on the north in LPR is important, but this town is not important from strategic perspective. The only importance of this Novosilovska that if Ukrainians were able to get control over this town, that means that now they would be able to start storming of Kuzyomovka, this town. And as you can see, there is a road that leads to the east, to the Svatove line, to all these towns. So from some point of view, this is a very important town. But if I remember, during the previous months, the Ukrainians managed to enter this town maybe 5 or 6 times, and after that the Russians pushed them back and forced them to step back. So we'll see the progress on this front line. Sooner or later something is going to happen there anyway. If we're talking about the Bakhmut, as you can see, the Bakhmut front line is stable. Today the Russians reported that they shut down these Ukrainian aircraft in this area. If we're talking about the battles on the ground, there were no videos, any confirmation of any progress from any side. So let's see and let's follow the situation. Now we are moving to one of the most important, one of the most interesting area. It's the Donetsk front line and South Donetsk front line. As you can see, there are a lot of icons in this area, and to tell the truth, we got a lot of progress from the Russian side. Of course, the Russians didn't take control over the thousands of miles that the Ukrainians did in the Kharkiv offensive operation or something like this. But the Russians managed to take one of the most important highlands, checkpoints, the crosses, and so on. First, let's talk about Donetsk area. And if you remember, yesterday I told you that I believe that soon Oputna is going to fall, and we discussed the situation yesterday, and today we got, during the day, somewhere at noontime, we got the first update that Ukrainians were forced to leave Oputna. And as you can see, there is like small icons. The Russians has updated their map. This is the first confirmation of that fact, so I don't think that Ukrainians left Oputna, but I believe that they were forced to leave some checkpoints. I believe that they still control some territory of Oputna, but something tells me that soon the Ukrainians will lose this bridgehead, and we can say that the battle for Avdiivka has started. If we take a look at the western source of map, of course there are no updates in this area, but let's do some updates on the map according to the information we have. So for now, we can say that this area, we can split this area in let's say a few parts. The first one is this one. And according to the Russian sources we have these days, the Russians controls a town by the name of Vadiana, or they're completing the clearing operation. Today we got the first confirmation that the Ukrainians were forced to leave Oputna. So I believe that we can color this territory in red color, so for better understanding of the situation. This is the first area that the Russians got control over. Now the Russians are trying to develop their offensive operation in direction of Nivolska. We discussed this situation many times, and in direction of Pervomayska. But these two areas, like Pervomayska, Nitailova, and Nivolska, are still under the Ukrainian control. So we can say that this is the current situation on the front line. And now the question from the Russian side, what to do next? Because I believe that they will continue developing their offensive operation in direction of Pervomayska, Nitailova, Nivolska. They will try to take these areas under their control, and these very important areas. And a few videos ago we discussed what might be the next step from the Russian side if they want to attack Avdiivka. And my projection was that the Russians will try to attack Severna. But to tell the truth, I've changed my mind, or at least not changed my mind, but at least the Russians have few options what to do this, because first of all, we need to understand that if we take a look at this map, we see just the towns like Severna, Toninka, Lastichkina, Avdiivka. Let's take a look at the Russian source map where I see the same like towns and so on. But believe me, according to the last updates and according to the experience we have from this special operation, I know that every single line, the forest, small like forest line, the small line of forest of trees, is full of Ukrainians. All these lines is the big trenches between, let's say, Avdiivka and the rest of the position, the Russian position. So I believe that all these trenches are full of Ukrainians, and it's not a very easy job for the Russians to continue their offensive operation from Vadiana in direction of Severna. And furthermore, we know that this is the residential area with the big buildings, so the Ukrainians do have possibilities if they need to pin down the Russians if they decide to attack Severna. So this is the reason I think that the Russians will decide to move a little bit to the west. And first they will as soon as they got these towns like Oputna and Vadiana, they'll prepare their own fortification in this area, trying to not to lose this territory, because the Ukrainians do still have possibilities to attack, to do some counter-offensive pressure and to return this town. I believe that the Russians will concentrate on the towns like Pervomayska, because we know that they're doing some clearing operation in this town. For now, I can't even tell you the real control, who controls this town. Or this town approximately I believe that this town is in the gray zone. If we're talking about Nitailova, this town is totally under Ukrainian control. Nivoyskoye also still under Ukrainian control, but the Russians are storming and moving in this direction. And if the Russians are able to take these towns, of course, then they will be able to move to the north. And if you can see, if we compare these two areas, there are less places where the Ukrainians can build their own fortification. Furthermore, there is just a few ways how to support town by the name of Yasnobrodovka. As you can see, there is one road from the west, this one. And of course, if the Russians are able to take control over Nitailova, and Nitailova is a very nice position that located between rivers, so it's easy to storm and take, and it's easy to defend from the Ukrainians, from the attacks from the west direction. If we're talking about the Russians, it's not an easy job to stop the Russians because there are no barriers, and the Russians can move along the towns, and sooner or later Nitailova is going to fall. So from Nitailova, I believe that the Russians will try to take Yasnobrodovka, this town. And they will try to establish the bridgehead in this area, in Yasnobrodovka, and after that they will try. With this attack, they will be able to pin down the all supports of this area, and furthermore, they will be able to do something with the mass that located on this side. There, as you can see, a lot of water barriers, so they can at least pin down the Ukrainians in this area. And after that, as you can see, all this area between, let's say, Yasnobrodovka, the towns like Umanskaya, Toninkaya, Orlovka, Lastочкine, all these Ukrainian fortification will be not like unprotected, but at least for now it will be much more easier for the Russians to develop their offensive operation in direction of Avdiivka from Yasnobrodovka. Let's say first take Umanskaya, and after that to attack these forces in their flank. And I believe that the Russians will move a little bit to the west, and then they will try to develop their offensive operation to the north, and trying to make a very big hook. Furthermore, from this area, it's much more easy to control the supply and support roads of Orlovka, because Orlovka is a logistics center, focal point for the Avdiivka that Ukrainians are using to have support from the mainland. And of course, and if we are talking about attack in direction of Severnaya, like the closest way to Avdiivka, in this case, the Russians will be able to cut the roads that connects Orlovka logistic with Avdiivka. But anyway, there are still a lot of ways how to support Avdiivka from the north and so on. But if the Russians move to the west, to this area, from this area, they will be able to cut at least the, let's say, the west and west-north roads of supply and support of Orlovka and Avdiivka. Furthermore, I believe that this week we are going to see some kind of activization of the Russian force front line near Novobakhmutovka. Anyway, if the Russians want to be successful and don't want to have attack in their flanks, they need to complete clearing of Novobakhmutovka, of this area, just to short the front line to be on the safe side. And as you can see, this town, let's say, it is located between two Russian positions. This is not an easy job. It will take months, but weeks, I believe. But if the Russians want to start this operation these days, they need to complete the clearing of Novobakhmutovka the next weeks, 1 or 2 or something like this. So I believe that the battle for Avdiivka has been started. But this is not the most important update for today. And now the updates are coming from Vuhledar front line, from this area. If you take a look at the Russian sources map, you're gonna see that there are a lot of icons showing that the Russians started the movement all along the front line, starting from Pavlovka and ending in Novomikhailovka. As we discussed, the Ukrainians didn't expect this attack, and during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians lost around 100 soldiers, something around 10 armored vehicles, 6 soldiers were surrendered, 1 tank were captured, or something like this. So as you can see, the Russians attacks, and today we got during the day a lot of reports, and by the end of this day we got the first report that the Ukrainians were forced to leave Pavlovka and that the Russians got control over this town. If we take a look at this map showed the approximate progress of the Russians during the day, and the most important part is not even that the Russians, according to this map, and we'll discuss this, is important that they got control of Pavlovka, something like this. Pavlovka, of course, is very very important town. But the most important area that the Russians got control over is the area, as you can see according to these two arrows, the area between the green line and the gray line. This is the most important because this is the highlands, and from this area you are able to establish fire control or eye control over the road that supports Vuhledar. Furthermore, from this area you are able to attack Novomikhailovka from the south, and from that very moment Novomikhailovka can be attacked from three sides as well, like from the north, east, and from the south. According to the Western source map, as you can see, this map is not updated at all, showing that the towns like Salotka, Blagodatная, Vladimirovka, Mikholska, all these towns under Ukrainian control. But according to this map, according to this update of the Russian progress during the day, we see that the Russians got control over very big territories. Let's update this map for better understanding. So this is approximately the area that was taken by the Russians during the day, and during the, not that just during the day, it is the area showing the let's say the difference between the Western sources map and the territory that was taken by the Russians during the previous clashes in this area. So as you can see, the progress is very big, and furthermore, we are not just talking about the territories, the most important, we are talking about the checkpoints and the highlands in this area, about the hills and so on. So and now the Russians control at least a few things. First of all, they from this area they're able to pin down the Ukrainians all along this road, and I believe that it's highly unlikely that Ukrainians are able to use this road to support and supply Vuhledar. They still have some possibilities to receive some supply from the north. But furthermore, today we got up that the Russians were trying to develop their attack in direction of Vodianne as well. I'm not sure that it was the real attack. It was like some kind of pin down attack to pin down the Ukrainians and to stretch their forces, because they still haven't moved enough of reserve to stop the Russians, and this is the big problem. And of course, the most important is now that the Russians are able to stop storming Novomikhailovka, because the Russians are fighting for Novomikhailovka, I believe that since the beginning of the special operation, maybe since the beginning of 2014, and this is the very big problem for the Russians. And if they're able to take control of Novomikhailovka, of course, this entire front line might be collapsed very easily in a days, not even maybe in hours. The Ukrainians will be forced to run away from this area. But anyway, now the time works in Russian favor, but we need to understand that Ukrainians are moving more and more reinforcement, and soon they will be able to start the battle from the road, let's say, and then we'll see what is going to be next. But the most important thing that we discussed yesterday, that the Ukrainians concentrated their freshest forces on the north and in the south, and there are not much fresh forces in this area, not much reserves. And as you can see, the Russians are developing their offensive operation near Donetsk and near Vuhledar. Now the Ukrainians need to decide what is. I'm not sure. Maybe they have enough of forces to stop the Russians on both sides. Maybe they don't, but anyway, they need to make a very difficult decision. They can't move the forces from the south and from the north. They don't have just time for this. They can send the territory defense forces or something like this, or what is worst situation, to move the fresh forces from Olekhov-Gulyai-Polye front line to this area. And if they do this, we understand that there are going to be no talks about any counter-offensive operation from this area. And if the Ukrainians plan to do something in this area, they won't be able if they move their forces to this area. So the Russians chose a very nice time to attack. A very nice time to attack, because the Ukrainians, they believed in their strength and their force after the successful, and they decided that they have initiative in this war. But as we see the picture, the current situation shows that it was a big mistake if Ukrainians thought like that, because now they need to do something. They need to refactor their front lines, trying to stop the Russian progress in the south near Donetsk. And if they do this, of course, they may be forced to weak some other front lines, and of course, who knows, maybe this is not the main attacks, because the Russians also can use these two attacks as not the main attacks, not like false flag, but they're attacking. If they have progress, it's good, but as soon as they see some Ukrainian forces, they might stop for a while and to wait the next best time to develop their offensive operation. Maybe the Russians have another totally different place, another third place to attack, and the main area to attack. Who knows where is this area? But I believe that soon we're going to see. If we're talking about Kherson district, the same progress, the same picture in this area. The Ukrainians were trying to attack all along the front line, but they were defeated without any progress. They lost around 180 soldiers, 32 armored vehicles. And if we're talking about other actions on the front lines, the Ukrainians were trying to make another landing operation near Vuhledar, but their forces were destroyed. The Russians didn't provide any information about the losses. Also, the Russians destroyed this training center in Achakov, where the United Kingdom intelligence special forces were preparing the Ukrainian special forces who was involved in the attack of the Russians in Crimea, in Sevastopol port, and we discussed the situation yesterday. Furthermore, the Russians did one important decision. Now they're moving a lot of fortification engineering construction to this area. I'm not sure what the Russians are planning to do exactly, but as you can see, there are not much places where the Russians are able to hide and to build fortification, because they will be always under fire from Achakov. But for now, I believe that the Russians took a decision to prepare some kind of fortification in this area, some engineering facilities to build, and from this area, the Russians decided to completely pin down the Ukrainians all along at least this part of the Black Sea, without any possibilities for the Ukrainians to do anything in this area. So let's see what's going to be next. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your like to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.